quit smoking was 1955 or 1956, 57, somewhere in there. Well, I had my studio over in Hollywood, California. And I remember, for some reason, I quit. For some reason, I don't remember. And that time it only lasted about 2 weeks. Now, 2 weeks, you're pretty well, you got it pretty well beat in 2 weeks. You're still hooked, but I mean, it isn't bothering you as much as it did the first few days, you know. And I could have easily walked away from it, but there again, I picked it up again. And then I kept on smoking. I changed to pipe. The last 25 years of my smoking, I smoked a pipe, which isn't nearly as hard on you as cigarettes. Cigarettes just suck in every breath of this stuff. Well, with pipe, it's what you get by accident, because you puff, but you don't inhale. But nevertheless, you've got a cloud of smoke around you, and you inhale that cloud of smoke, which is much less than getting it direct. And so consequently, it's probably only a tenth as bad as cigarettes. And I enjoyed it. It's another thing about pipe smoking. It's an enjoyable thing. A cigarette is simply a nervous habit.
Right.
You get in the habit of smoking a cigarette under certain circumstances, like when I was writing or something like that. I'd write and I'd come to a phrase that I wanted to, a place where I wanted to stop and think about something, you know, before I wrote any further. Pick up a cigarette. Same thing when I wrote arrangements. I'd write and then all of a sudden I'd stop and I want to figure something. Pick up a cigarette. Many times I'd pick up a cigarette and have it lit before I realized I still had one on the ashtray burning. Yeah, it's just that kind of a habit.
Right.
Oh, I'll tell you a habit. Back in the 50s, when I was active in the mutuals of the church, Mormon church, the family all went there. And I didn't go to church, but I was very active in mutual. Whenever the kids went putting on plays or something, I'd help them with it and so forth. So I was considered one of the clan, even if I wasn't. And so anyhow, I had done something illustrious, I guess. I don't remember what. But anyhow, because of that, I was allowed on a Sunday to sit up behind the podium in the back with all of the wheels, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And here I am, sitting up there and back, and out in front of me is the whole audience, you know, in the chapel, in full chapel. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I get a little nervous. I pick out my pack of cigarettes, and I pop like that to pop one of the cigarettes out. And right then I realized where I was. And I snuck that thing back in my pocket like as fast as you could ever believe. And I was hoping, oh boy, I hope nobody saw that. And maybe they didn't, because nobody mentioned anything. That was a busy moment for me, I'll tell you. But that's how the habit gets you. You find yourself grabbing one of those things in places where you shouldn't. But anyhow, I finally quit smoking in 1983. All the way along, I kept telling myself, by this time now I know that smoking is harmful, and if I gotta go, I don't want to do it because of smoking, because I can quit smoking.
Right.
Some of the other things I might not be able to do anything about, but this I can. So I made a deal with myself. I says, if I ever get a bad report on my lungs from a physical, I had a physical regularly every year, that's going to be the end of my smoking. And I had myself conditioned for that fact, because it's over years I kept telling myself this. If you ever get a bad one, boy, you're going to quit smoking. Well, anyhow, along about 1956, or somewhere thereabout. What am I talking about? I'm talking about 83. I went to the doctor for my physical, and he taps my back and he listens and he says, I hear a little rattle or some little noise in there. So he listened some more, and he says, "You smoke?" And I says, "Yeah, I do. I smoke a pipe." He said, "Well, I think you better be a little cautious. It sounds like maybe getting a little emphysema." "What's emphysema?" And he tells me it's a deterioration of the lung. And I always have had what I call respirophobia. I don't think, I never found it in the dictionary, but it should be. It's a fear of not being able to breathe. And so that scared the wits out of me. I thought, boy, I wonder if I've gone too far with this. But bingo, the next day was the last day ever. Or that evening, I went to dinner with Nancy, your aunt, and Gary, your cousin. And I smoked a pipe after that dinner, I remember, this after having been to the doctor in the afternoon. And then I never touched it again after that. And it came fairly easier. I remember going back to the days when I tried to quit smoking cigarettes, and boy, it was a holy terror of a job, believe me. But it seemed to go easier, and I don't know whether because pipe smoking was an easier switch to non-smoking, or whether it was the fact that I had conditioned myself, that I had heard the magic words, and I'd quit. But that was the end of the smoking. Thank goodness for that. Oh, and another thing, smoking a pipe, you burn your clothes, and you burn everything. You know, the ashes fall out of your pipe all over everything. I didn't have a shirt to my name, and very few pair of pants that didn't have little tiny pinholes all over where I hit by live ash. And also furniture. Oh, it was a mess.
That's funny. Well, I want to. I think I want to call that good for today.
Okay.
And since we lost the band, well, the thing was we didn't get into the band anyways.
No.
I mean, all that we lost, we were just talking about music.
That's right. We talked about music.
And
yeah, there's a lot of good things.
as we've been here talking about it, I had a good idea of how will be able to get that back.
Yeah, well, that's no problem.
And what we'll do is we'll
We're
just
still
have a
talking
time.
about that era.
Yeah. We'll next time, whenever it is, because like I said, this coming week I have off. So this coming week I'd like to do it a couple times at least, if
That's
we could.
fine.
Maybe even more. But what I'm going to do is we'll go through some of your music. We'll have you run us through some of your music that you have from the era, and then you'll just be able to
I don't
talk
have a
about it.
thing on our band.
No,
I
I mean
don't
of
have
the
a
music from the era.
Oh, play some of it?
You can play some of it, and we'll listen to some of your records and stuff.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
Because that's what we talked about.
That's right.
We lost it all, so we'll listen to it, and you can talk
Let
about
me-
it again, and maybe that'll refresh, and then we'll just cover it that way, and maybe
Yeah.
it'll probably be better anyways.
Clarify this for me. You are either going to do an awful lot of editing on this thing, or it's, well, I'd say if it's going to be an ideal job, it's going to require a lot of editing. Because here, now like this, we've talked about this music through the 20s and everything else, of which I have quite a few different things in there, in the way of recordings and tapes and everything else, to illustrate what I'm talking about. But you're going to have to, if we do this now, you're going to have to cut this into our conversation. Is that what, are you going?
Well, we lost it all.
Well,
we don't have that conversation.
No, we came back. Didn't we come back and get into it? No, we didn't.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is
Oh.
we lost all of that anyways.
Well, then, what, are you planning that when we get to do this again, that particular part?
Well, what I'm saying is that instead of trying to sit down and talk about everything that we've already talked about, because that never works well,
Mhm.
we'll just, instead of covering it like in this situation, since we were just talking about the music of the time anyways, and how it developed, we'll just have you play some of it. Maybe you can fiddle around with your trumpet
I don't think
a
so.
little bit,
Uh,
and we'll talk about it that way.
All right,
And it'll give it better context anyways.
all right, okay.
And we can actually listen to some things, and you can.
Well, let me know when you gotta
and-
get into that, because I'll have to go in there and pick
Well,
out
we'll
some
do it
stuff.
next week. So
Okay,
one of those days next week we'll do it. So maybe you can be thinking about it this weekend or whatever.
yeah, I will.
And since we've already talked about, and maybe this was a good exercise anyways, talking about it, because then you can kind of show us examples, and we can hear examples of kind of that evolution that you were talking about.
All right,
You know?
yeah,
You know what I'm talking about? And then you
Yeah.
can kind of just walk us through it,
okay,
and we can hear it.
yeah, well, I've got some CDs in there.
And you can talk about it as we go along with it, and mention everything, just like we did, because we lost all of it.
Mhm.
You know, so as far as everybody knows, we haven't talked about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Which I'm less upset about now, because I think this might be better anyways.
Oh, yeah, that's right, if you're gonna
Being
run the
able to
music into
hear
it.
it, and you
I
can
think,
talk about
I think that's
it.
great, yeah.
So maybe it's better anyways, and we didn't waste the tape. You know what
You
I
know,
mean?
this is in your department, not mine, but I was just wondering, you're gonna have to do when you're speaking of editing, you're talking about cropping out the crap, aren't you?
Yeah.
You know, the tail ends are where,
Yeah,
like,
well, when-
talking where we're doing now, which is of no interest to our people,
Right.
our audience. That things are gonna be chopped out, but how much editing are you gonna do with placing these things, replacing these things in more appropriate spots?
Well, there's two things. Actually, there's three things that we're talking about. The one thing is that I'm not going to do any editing, and we'll have all of it, because there's some people that are going to be interested in everything, even the crap. I mean, it's family members. I
Yeah.
mean, they want to just have everything, just to have it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And then of the other two things, the one thing is I'll edit it down to a 2 to 2.5 hour piece for family members who would be interested,
yeah,
and that'll be the oral history. That'll be the actual oral
Mhm.
history.
Yeah.
The project that's the project we're doing. And then the resonating project is my project, which is this film about making this project.
oh, yeah. I see.
So, but that's my piece,
Yeah,
and that's why I like keeping the camera running right now
yeah,
for that.
I see, yeah, I see.
But for the oral history, which is going to be, like I said, maybe a 2.5 hour thing, I'm thinking a 2 to 2.5 hour thing, then that'll be. I'll still have to cut back a lot, obviously, but I'll be picking the stories and things like that I think are the most interesting and the most relevant to your whole oral history as a continuous whole. And then so I'll just be picking the pieces and putting it together that way. And I'll probably be putting it together primarily chronologically. I mean, we'll try and keep it to flow through
All right,
as
well, that's what I was
a
wondering.
as a
That
history.
means you are going to have to take chunks and move it around.
Yeah.
somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, because we're not following necessarily a chronological
No.
order.
No,
But when I piece it together, I think I'll try and keep it as chronological as possible.
yeah.
Just for everyone's reference, it'll
Well,
be
you
easier
got
that way.
like we discussed in the beginning, you've got to have a lot of freedom. You can't be completely chronological, because otherwise you'll be breaking into a continuity of one phase that runs over several years.
Right.
And if that's all broken up into slices, it doesn't make any sense. You've got
Right.
you've got to follow the continuity. How does this thing grow?
Exactly. Yeah. And we'll find out as we go along. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the whole purpose of it.
Yeah.
And that's part of what I'm going to be doing for my part of it, is I'm going to be adding some of those aspects of what what are some of the ways of making a good oral history. And we're going to find out things, and we're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And,
We've already
but
made a lot.
We've already made several mistakes. Seems like every time. But you know, the funny thing is, this is always how it is.
Yeah. no
Whenever,
doubt.
and I know it's not me because all of my other filmmaker friends
Same way.
go through the same thing. But
Well, that's the reason you overshoot a lot, because
yeah,
you can throw out an awful lot of stuff and still have an adequate amount of footage.
exactly. I mean, for everything that we've done wrong,
We've got did a few.
I don't. Yeah, there's been some really magical things too.
Yeah.
I mean, not to be trite and say magical, but there's been some really, really good moments too.
Good,
And you
good.
get good moments, and then
Yeah,
you
I
lose
noticed
some
it.
things.
I could, when I went through this stuff, what I've been through, what you have on a
Right.
CD now, I noticed the high and low spots.
Yeah.
With me, the high spots were when I was talking jovial things. That's always a high spot for me.
Right.
When I'm serious, that I'm waiting to end so that I can see some more of the jovial stuff. And I don't know whether other people are the same way or not. Maybe in those serious things, I'm saying something of a historical import that is important to them. I don't know, that might be.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Which
sure it is.
justifies it,
I'm
yeah.
sure it is. But anywho, that's what we're going to do, and we'll try and do that next week.
Okay.
And we'll get into and I want to hear, well, for your purposes of getting ready for our next time. You've told a couple stories about the band, and well, I think the stories. Well, you know what stories you told. You watched it. So I'd like to hear several more stories. And I know
Okay.
you said
Well,
you've had a million.
Why don't you
so,
write some of these things down that you want to hear? So that,
well, I don't know the stories I want to hear because I haven't heard them before.
oh, you mean I bring the thing up and you say, hey, that's good, I want to get on it. Like you wouldn't leave sex alone, for example.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, well, just specifically, you know, what the typical day in the life of being in the band. Some
Yeah,
stories
there's a
about
lot- there's a lot about
going to
being in the
different
band,
places. What people were like, how people
Yeah.
acted towards your band specifically. I know you mentioned that somewhat, but we probably lost some of the stuff
Yeah,
you
that's
mentioned
true.
about it.
That's true.
So, but I think I'm going to lead into it though. I think I want to do this thing with the music and play some music
All
and
right,
stuff like
that's a
that.
good way to bring into it.
And
because
then
I got some.
and then I'll start asking you about questions.
Yeah.
And then I'll ask you questions about the band and
Yeah.
but have in mind some stories that you want to tell about the
Okay.
band specifically, and then you can throw them in when the time is right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And we'll do it that way.
Okay.
And then next week we'll also probably be covering. Then we'll want to get into the 30s. So
Can we see this?
yeah,
Part of this?
yeah. You want to see it right now?
You're going to fold it up here pretty soon, I imagine. aren't
Yeah. You want to watch it right now then?
you? Yeah, I'd like to. If you got the time.
Yeah. Do you?